Welcome. Welcome to the show, everybody. I want to remind each of you to like and subscribe. On YouTube, we are Film Talk Radio. This is Alma Castro. She's the owner of Castro's Restaurant. She is a musician and she was the former chairman of the Arts Commission. Most importantly, she's going to be running for City Council in Santa Fe, District 1. Alma, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
So, you representing District 1, I think will be a great thing since you know the characters, you know what it is to be a Santa Fecino. You're kind of bound to it inextricably in a way that somebody who thinks Santa Fe may be a nice place to retire or it's so cute and artistic or what, but it's kind of in your root.
Well, and what's interesting in this race in particular, as opposed to other things that I've seen. So I had been in Chicago for 4 years doing some labor organizing and teaching mariachi in the public schools when my mom called and said it was time to come home. And one of the things we've seen is a lot of people leave and look for opportunity elsewhere, but how many of us have the opportunity to come back? And I couldn't pass up the opportunity to use my time at school learning about co-ops and alternative business models and have an actual implementation at Cafe Castro. So I came home and I was interested to see how many folks who have been here for a while, but maybe don't have longstanding roots, are in positions of power and are on some of these advisory boards. I tried to do my part by being on the arts and culture sort of advisory board, although the department has become a lot more than that, which is exciting. There's the ability to do grant making, there's ability to put public art in the South Side Center that they're building right now. I mean, art in this community is so vibrant and such a like staple of Santa Fe that arts and culture to me should be one of our main talking points,
And
selling
export, yeah,
points,
exports
what
too,
attracts
right?
people here. Yeah. And so I did that for a little bit, did the arts commission, and realized that everyone is calling for locals to be on the city council, to be more involved. We're losing ground a little bit in terms of our arts and culture being homegrown.
Well, and I don't think I need to look it up to know that you were the youngest chair ever of the Arts Commission, but I'm guessing you were.
Indeed.
Yeah, so you mentioned co-ops. Tell me a little bit about the importance of co-ops and food sovereignty within this community, how they can uplift workers, but also make it a more successful business.
I mean, the fact that you're even asking those questions is impressive because we live in a city that is not the most creative for being a creative hub in how we deal with our economy. We're super focused on investing in the plaza downtown, our image of what I have called a spaghetti western version of Santa Fe is. Just today, we went to lunch sort of at Cafecito, right behind like the Raven off of Cerrios Road, a really cool new little space where folks are living, they're building it up, there's galleries all over the place. Santa Fe isn't just the idea of cowboys and Indians fighting in the quote unquote wild west, which I resist because we're still wild. We haven't been tamed. Don't let them tell you the west has been tamed. It's exciting to be able to say that, even though I don't think that 35 is young, to be honest, that young people are getting involved in politics and
Is
that we're
that how old you
starting to
are?
become
30?
a little bit more open.
You're
I'm
35?
35. Yeah.
You look very good. Like I would have never guessed that.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue your thought.
To your point, right? 35, I'm, pushing 40. I'm not the youth anymore, but we are taking the baton and we're sort of the people that I looked to when I was a young person for guidance. And I'm hoping that we could be a good example in terms of really bringing in some of this local power, but also new ideas from all over the place.
Yeah, and I think having fresh ideas, original ideas, taking these thoughts in your head or dreams and manifesting them, making them into reality is something that not everybody is capable of. So I admire you kind of taking that initiative.
Thank you. Yeah, and in terms of the actual structure of Castros and what I'm looking to do, the idea of democratic ownership to me is super important because I saw how hard my parents worked and they deserve everything that they got and all of the things that I benefited from in terms of going to college, in terms of growing up in a stable community, always having a roof over my head, food always available. Everyone deserves that. And I know that not every restaurant worker in Santa Fe has that luxury. when I was organizing at the worker center, I know people that were living in their cars and still working three jobs. It was unsustainable. And a lot of those people can't live here anymore. I know that people that I go to school with or went to school with are living in Rio Rancho if they want to have a family. I'm lucky that, I have a couple sources of income. I'm a musician. I'm able to survive in this city, but I also don't have kids that I have to send to school or to college.
We're back, everybody. We're talking with Alma Castro. She's running for District 1 City Councilor here in Santa Fe. Alma, you were talking about your parents and how they worked so hard, and then friends of yours who aren't able to live here, or friends of yours who are working three jobs and barely able to survive. Tell me a little bit about how that informs you, how that shaped your politics, and who you are as a leader.
Well, I will be very upfront. I always wear my heart on my sleeve. I grew up the daughter of somebody who fled a civil war in El Salvador and saw what true capitalism can do and what, our influence as a country in other places can do in terms of creating difficult situations for people. So I definitely understand the bootstrap mentality that you work hard and you make it. My dad got here and was making $3 an hour washing dishes. But that's also why we live in a place that has regulations, minimum wages, safety. I worked for Somos Un Pueblo Unido when I was fresh out of college, and we built up one of the first worker centers in the state. Kudos to them; they're still doing amazing work. But it really was interesting how little power labor had in this city, just because we're so small. We can see in Las Vegas, Nevada, that there are organized restaurants, hotels, casinos in a way that we are not attempting to organize here. And so when I was able to go to school, I went to school at Oberlin College in the Midwest. They have a really developed co op system. I was like, wow, there's something new and different. We don't only have to be paying all of our wages and all of our earnings up to one CEO. We can actually redistribute things and people can survive and benefit from their labor. And that helped me understand that there was a way that we could all be prosperous, maybe not wealthy, because it is difficult to become wealthy in a small business. I can't say the restaurant is making millions, but we're all putting food on the table and we have a home and we're taking care of our kids.
Well, and let's not forget the restaurant is wildly successful. I had to park nearly a block away because it was so full. And I guess I wanted to ask you about the red chili recipe because that is a really authentic recipe. That's from the pods, right? Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I will admit that Daniel, my cousin, is the one who cooks all the food. I am the administrator. But it is red chili. We do chile caribe is what it's called, and we do a little bit of spices in there. My dad actually learned from the original Tomasita and Rosie, her sister at Tomasitas, and has not changed the recipe since. It's super simple. You use red chili, which is actually the same vegetable as green chili, just ripe. Um, and you put in a little garlic if you like it. Everybody has their own. I don't like a lot of flour, so the roux is the big difference. Some people will put more flour to make it a little bit more mild, a little bit more palatable to certain people. I am half Salvadoran. I don't eat super spicy food, but our red chili is good. It's not super spicy. It's always a mid flavor, thick, almost like a gravy, but not quite. Remember, it's a vegetable, not a sauce.
Yeah, I was dunking the tacos in it, and I took a side of both of them with me and had them with some eggs this morning. It was unbelievable.
I'll let the chef know he has your compliments.
Yeah, let Danielle know. So, yeah, I think, knowing that red chili recipe, having it be part of your family, that's who the representation in Santa Fe ought to be, in my opinion. It ought to be people who really know what this city is. And, we've seen city councilors, not to point at anybody in particular, but they come here after having some career in some other city and think it's going to be fun and cute and don't really understand what they're in for, and it kind of embitters them and burns them out pretty quickly. And then we've also seen kind of a group of them that aren't thrilled about the salary they're making, and the first chance they get to run for mayor, they drop the seat for their mayoral run. I think you are somebody that not looking for it to be your paycheck or your job, but really wants to make a difference in this community. And I don't think we really have to worry about you running for mayor unless there's some outcry from the citizens saying, hey, we need you as mayor.
And this will be very controversial. But I am sitting in the seat that Debbie Jaramillo once sat in, right? And we haven't really had a local champion since her. In
Yeah,
my opinion, we need more local champions.
yeah, and I mean, Debbie, in my opinion, was controversial for all the right reasons. She was the mayor who gave the rail yard back to the city. It would have likely been a shopping mall otherwise, and she said, "No, this is a community asset," and she preserved it as such. Used her power as mayor and her influence with the council to do so. And so it was Debbie Jaramillo's seat at one point, and then fast forward all the way to a couple of decades later, it was a good friend of mine, Patty Boucher's seat. And when she chose not to run again, it was another dear friend of mine, Renee Villarreal, had the seat. She's just finishing her second term and announced that she's not running again. So I really couldn't think of a better successor for Renee than you. Are the two of you tight? And do you have her blessing?
It would seem that way. So I will be honest that I'm closer to her sister Amy, who I worked with at Somos un Pueblo Unido when she was doing anthropological research around the driver's license. And so I got to know the family very well. Both of her parents are really amazing, accomplished people. And I got to know Renee really as a counselor. And I'm impressed with the work she's done, but I also realize that she's under a tremendous amount of pressure. And I think that her stepping down after two terms, as she said she would, really says something. We don't have term limits in this city. People have continued to hold power in those seats for years and years and years, which is how we get out of touch and how we lose real voices and representation, as you said. I don't plan to be there for 16 years and live off the paycheck of what the city council is going to give me. That doesn't mean that it isn't a full-time job and that we shouldn't. I understand that we're possibly going to have staff in the future, which is exciting to me. We might get more done. I was just at a meeting last night at Genoveva about the Alameda Street Bridge. I live on Agua Fria. It's really interesting how we don't plan for the future and then all of a sudden we're surprised that bridges collapse and there's too much traffic and people are getting hit by semi trucks when we're not planning for the growth of the city.
Or by those that poor old couple that was run over by the snowplow last year. I mean, that was a real tragedy. And there are many other accidents that we could talk about like that. Is public safety going to be one of your concerns as a councilwoman?
It has to be. I mean, and to be honest, I've been hearing from all sides. Law enforcement is saying that they can't compete with the actual wages that they have around in other cities. I don't want to call out Los Alamos in particular, but they pay very, very well. They have a lot of resources and assets that Santa Fe doesn't. We've always had that trope of, oh, Santa Fe gets all the funding and all the money goes to Santa Fe. But in reality, we can't even keep up with wages. So we have that piece. I also have a business next door to Pete's homeless shelter. Sorry, unhoused people shouldn't be called homeless. But I do think that it is a resource center that we need to be including some other resources around maybe addiction, maybe some people who need other types of mental health care that we haven't been able to fund. And so if we shift to looking at what the real causes of some of these issues are, that we might not need to have as many police on the street, or we might not necessarily have to have as many law enforcement officers, and we can pay the few we have better.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really touchy issue here, and I mean, Santa Fe was not a place with a ton of homeless people for the previous several decades. This was a recent explosion and it was exacerbated by the pandemic. There's a lot of creative ideas, turning new hotels into their shelters and all that. But just funding things like Esperanza and Pete's Place and chances for people to get back on their feet, I think is number one. So I guess my question is, when you're sitting on city council, do you have any ideas of what you would introduce to change that?
So the housing first model basically says that you get, and then if you continue to go through the program and get services, then you get housed. But if you are already sort of forced to be part of a program to become housed, there are a lot of issues where people don't feel comfortable or don't know what the resources are and so can't get put into the pipeline. But if we can offer people a safe place initially and then have the resources around them so they can reach out, it's much more likely that they're going to be successful.
Yeah, I've heard of I've heard something about that. I wasn't familiar with the term housing first, but I knew one of the problems that they were doing in the US and in some states here, they're doing housing first, and in some countries, it's very successful. But it's something like they've got to prove that they're off of drugs before they can get a house and things like that. And so I think putting them in houses first and then giving them the treatment, not these kind of draconian rules that somebody who can't even get their life together is supposed to abide by. I think kind of keeps them in a vicious cycle. And so, do you think housing first is something that can help solve it?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think that that's the point is we're not expecting people to meet these standards that we are putting on them, but rather we're meeting folks where they are. And what's interesting is that we can supplement things like we don't have a bike share program in Santa Fe. You can't easily like rent a bike and go somewhere and leave it and pick it up like we do in other cities. And so our public transit is horrendous. There was recently an article in the Reporter about how in 2020 they did this big audit and had all of these recommendations. Huh, interesting. People aren't taking recommendations again about how to fix some of the problems with our transit system. Simple as putting maps up at stops. People don't know where the stop is going, what route stop there, what times it comes. So if we can really create a more livable city for all of us, I think people who are unhoused are going to greatly benefit, especially if they are part of programs. We have a huge midtown campus that nobody knows what to do with. We have all of these city properties that people are debating about. We do have a housing crisis, but the housing crisis is at all levels. And we shouldn't be just focusing on people who can buy homes.
Yeah, in my neighborhood, it's like I walk the dog around and half of them are empty houses, not Airbnbs, but just houses that are empty. There's no car in the driveway, but the yard isn't trimmed. The yard isn't trimmed like a Airbnb. And then like another 40% are Airbnbs. And then so there's like maybe 10% of the houses actually have people living in them. And it's crazy. It's like the Twilight Zone in a lot of ways. And it used to be a neighborhood where a lot of people lived, where, a lot of it was young people in apartments or duplexes or that type of thing. But people actually lived here and they'd be out here barbecuing in their yards. And now it's like this ghost town feel with like a swarm of moths, and it could have likely come right out of the Twilight Zone. Tell me if you can, is it an empty building tax? What are some solutions, and what is the current leadership missing?
So I would say there is no current leadership, which is what is missing. There isn't a clear, like I said, sort of local champion. I'm not professing to be that local champion, but I do think that I have a great access. My table is wide, my table is long, and I have a lot of access to community members who are really smart and have great ideas. And I think that the best way that we're going to fix any of these issues is reaching into our community and realizing we have a lot of knowledge. I know that community input has been very difficult for some of our political leadership recently, It isn't fun. It's messy, but it is super necessary to talk to the community members because that's what I'm doing when I knock on doors. Some people are very concerned about the short term rental issue.
You know,
Some people have short term rentals and it's the only way they survive.
yeah, and I mean, I think that every person who's Airbnb-ing their own place when they're out of town needs a license. I think that's ridiculous. But, there's one guy with like 100 or 150 Airbnbs, and this person, of course, is so powerful that nobody would dare touch them. And so they make these kind of feckless laws that only enforce it against smaller companies or people basically wanting to rent their own property.
And I think that's why so many people are threatened by the idea of collectivization and collective power and training. Because the minute that we realize that we're galvanizing all this power and putting it in one person, and then they're able to influence policy, we start lifting the veil and people start realizing, oh, well, I do want to be civically engaged. I do want to be part of this process because I have an interest, I have a vested interest in this economy staying local, in there being housing. I know that development is a very sensitive subject for many people, but everyone that I've talked to is interested in keeping Santa Fe a semi rural community. I know that there was some conversations last night at the county commission meeting about the negativity of rural donuts in the city, but I don't think being a rural community is a problem or something to be ashamed of. We are retaining our culture, we're retaining our acequias, we're retaining our cultural food practices and growing practices. I don't mind not being an urban center. That doesn't mean I'm not modern. That doesn't mean I'm not um, contributing to society or creative in my own ways. We need to start valuing some of our homegrown ideas.
It's a city where there used to be one cab company. Now it's just Uber. So
Hmm.
that really made it a smaller city. I mean, I remember I was just in heaven in 2019 when I could Uber anywhere I wanted for $5 or $6 and, go downtown and have a great time and not necessarily have to walk home. The busing system was always weird, but there was a time, I think, with Debbie Jaramillo when we bought a bunch of new buses. They were really nice,
Yep.
conditioned, and I'm not sure. In high school, we used to, take the bus from downtown to the mall or from the mall to downtown.
Hmm.
We do that all the time. I don't know if kids these days have that option specifically. And, I'm often down in front of on Sheridan Street off of Palace where there's a bus station there. And I seldom see a lot of buses there. So tell me about how we can improve. I know there's a little bit of downtown shuttles and that type of thing.
Again, I think those are catering primarily to tourists. I think they're primarily taking folks to hubs where they can catch a plane. And I understand that when we invest in our airport here locally, that actually will benefit us because there will be more investment on that South Side corridor, and maybe there'll be a little bit more of a public transit investment. It shouldn't take tourists being in that part of town for us to care about the residents of that area. Lots of people live on the south side and work downtown and shouldn't have to pay for parking. Shouldn't, to be honest, it would really relieve some of the parking issues we had if people didn't have to have a car to get everywhere.
Well, and I heard that we don't have a head of parking at the moment. So I really disagreed with the previous head of parking. So I'm not sad to see him go. But what do you think we should look for in a new head of parking? If we're lucky
I
enough to finally
personally,
get
if we're lucky enough to even have an input, I'm always going to be in favor of something that is locally run, right? Privatizing anything is going to, one, you lose control, and two, you lose revenue. There's no reason for us to lose the revenue from the parking meters. It really should be a state run program. I understand that we are understaffed, that there isn't anyone for all of these programs. Maybe if we paid a little bit better, people wouldn't have to go move to other cities. We are planning to be a retiree community, a place like Vail. that only has people who go there for certain times of the year and then everyone is struggling the rest of the year, it's going to be very difficult for us to survive or retain any young people. Why do we even have, we don't have higher institutions. We just closed the College of Santa Fe. St. John's is the only one left.
God, I think it's touched so many of us, and it's so illustrative of what politics in New Mexico are. You know, there's the old guard, there's the gente, there's the young people, and we're all, fighting over water. So,
Yeah. How
uh,
times have not changed, right?
yeah, I think the more things change, the more they stay the same. So, tell me a little bit about the movie and what it's meant to you.
Hey, this is just such a staple of who I am as a person. I'm so excited to talk about Milagro Pinto's War. I was born in 1988, January of 1988. So the year it was filmed, my grandfather was actually a extra in the scenes where they're all hanging out in the town with his cowboy hat. I grew up. My family is from Cañoncito, Glorieta Pass, over going towards Tecos, and he sold wood on the side of the road going out by the old Las Vegas highway. The resilience of the people in New Mexico is so well exemplified, so well illustrated in this film. Everything down to the town hall in the church when everybody's getting together and trying to figure out what to do. That's how we make decisions in our communities. We listen to each other. We listen to our elders. We invite people to come and share with us their experiences of what it really means, like we were saying earlier, to live in a rural community. It's nothing to be ashamed of that we have learned from our ancestors how to water our plants in times of scarcity, but it isn't something that we can escape. This idea of development, this idea of bulldozing our lands and taking our water. People get upset that I say you're on stolen land. It's being actively stolen every day, and not just our land, but our water, our air, our environment is being polluted. We haven't talked too much about environmental justice, but the fires that we've had to experience, the times of drought. Do you remember the drought beetle? Or sorry, the bark beetle that just devastated all of our pinos? These things, one, we forgot how to deal with because we're not connected to our ancestry and our traditional ways of dealing with some of these plagues. But also, we have a very short term memory. What about those 500-year floods? Are we going to be prepared for it next time?
Now, your grandfather was really salt of the earth. He escaped El Salvador. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
My dad, actually, yeah.
Oh,
He had a really rough upbringing. I mean, everything from going to pick coffee beans when he was a young man to migrating here with his cousin. They were in their early 20s, and both of them ended up working in these very nice restaurants downtown, dealing with all the tourists and the very Santa Fe experience at the time. The 80s must have been quite an interesting Santa Fe. I still made it to see rodeo nights, but not quite the real Santa Fe, as people will say. Um, but he was the first of a wave, and so my uncles also came. And interestingly enough, most of them became restaurateurs, right? As most immigrant families, they came from milking cows and then did what they could, washing dishes, and learned a trade and became the owners of the burrito company, of Cafe Castro, of the Red Enchilada, of Mucho Gusto. We're blessed to be able to have a legacy. And we're able to have gone to college. Me and my cousins all pretty much have gone to school, have been able to follow our dreams. Most of us are artists in some way. But that also means that these family businesses and legacies need to go to someone. And in my opinion, the people who've been working them for 16 years, the restaurant workers who have been there and met the customers and built relationships, are who we should be investing in.
God, I wasn't aware of Mucho Gusto and Red Enchilada being part of the family. I know they still do El Salvadorian food at Red Enchilada. What was the other one you mentioned?
The burrito company.
Oh, yeah. And so that's a great way for us to talk about your event, right? When is the Burrito Company event?
So June 8th, we'll be starting at 5 o'clock. It'll go for a few hours. As I mentioned, I'm sort of a musician, so I'm gonna have a few friends come and jam, and we'll be playing music. I'll be talking to people about my platform. Any input is greatly appreciated. But I am doing public financing. So the big part of this is that I have to get $305 donations from my district to prove that the community is behind me. And I've been blessed with so many people coming to support, and I can't imagine a better way to celebrate us as a people than to go back downtown and occupy that space.
Bless you for doing public financing. Tell me the importance of that and how we've seen big companies and donors bankroll politicians, political action committees, Citizens United. There's so many ways for elections to be bought legally in this
Yep.
country. How does public financing of elections help?
So the idea of having sort of a level playing field and having caps has been super unpopular, obviously, with folks who can really fundraise hundreds of thousands of dollars. But for folks who aren't wealthy and whose communities aren't wealthy and can only contribute a little, there is no hope to be able to win a race unless there is some input from the government, some cap, some leveling of this playing field. So, I am a small business owner. I probably could raise a ton of money if I really broke my back and got some sponsorships and maybe cozied up to some people that I don't like quite so much. But that's not how politics should be won. And I really believe that the city of Santa Fe should be investing in people of all colors, of all backgrounds, of all incomes being part of the process. And this is the only way that some people are going to be able to have access to even, I mean, a $15,000 raise is not much considering what some people are investing in a small city council race.
Well, and those ads are annoying. You're watching the game or watching the news in the morning on Channel 7, and they play the same one during each commercial break ad nauseum. And while they are effective in some races, I think they do, these attack ads can leave a bad taste in your mouth, but just the repetitiveness of it, I think, is what I find most irritating.
And the rhetoric, right? Like I said before, am an open book. All of being a Santa Vecina, all of my good times and my bad times were for the world to see. I remember my parents saying, when you're out there, remember, they're seeing us in you. And so I can't hide very much from my community. There are going to be things that people like and things that people dislike. But I am who I am. I'm a brown, queer, young business owner who has alternative ideas and is half immigrant. And I can't change that about myself.
Yeah, nor should you. I think who you are is so much of the power of this campaign, and the authenticity of your personality really comes through. And I think that's really going to attract voters. That's pretty much a show, Alma. Is there anything else you can tell me before we sign out?
No, just thank you so much for all the work that you do. Let me fangirl a little bit on just the amazing work that the film festival has done, that this show is doing. Santa Fe has some really amazing creatives, and anything that we can do to support each other in this community, the better.
Alma, thanks so much. This has been such a fun show, and I'm so excited to see the campaign really take off and start to snowball. Everybody, the election is in November. Alma Castro is running for city councilor in District 1, and you can also see her at Castro's restaurant.
2811 Rios Road, and you could catch me June 8th at Burrito Company downtown after 5 p.m. Jam out.
Everybody, we'll see you next week. This was Alma Castro, District 1 city council candidate. Thanks so much.